I died at 42. I didn't realize it immediately. There was no pain. No bright light. No final dramatic moment like in the movies. 1 second I was there, sitting behind the steering wheel, and the next, something simply stopped. The engine was still running. I remember that clearly. The low, steady vibration beneath my hands. The faint smell of gasoline mixed with old leather. The dashboard glowing softly in the dark, numbers and icons blinking like they were trying to tell me something important. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look at it. I already knew what it was. Another message I wouldn't answer. Another conversation I would postpone. Another reminder of a life I kept pushing away, telling myself I'd deal with it later. Later had become my favorite word. Later, I'll call her back. Later, I'll explain. Later, I'll fix it. The car was parked across the street from an apartment building I barely recognized anymore. It used to feel like home once. Now it was just a place where lights were on, where life was happening without me. I stared at the windshield. Rain had started to fall, thin at first, then heavier, droplets sliding down the glass, blurring the city lights into long streaks of orange and white. Everything outside looked distant. Unreal. That's when it happened. Not a crash. Not a heart attack I felt coming. Just silence. The vibration stopped. The buzzing stopped. The thoughts stopped. For a brief moment, I thought I had fallen asleep. Then I realized I couldn't feel my hands anymore. I tried to move. Nothing. No panic. No fear. Only an overwhelming, crushing calm. And then, darkness. When I opened my eyes, I expected nothing. Instead, I saw light. Real light. Sunlight, warm and bright, cutting through thin curtains and landing directly on my face. It was so sudden that I flinched, raising my arm to shield my eyes. My arm. I felt it. That alone should have terrified me. I pushed myself up, breathing hard, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I was in a bed. Not the back seat of my car. Not a hospital bed. Not a place of death. A bed I knew. Too well. The room was small. Smaller than the one I'd slept in just hours before, or what felt like hours. The walls were a pale, tired color. A desk sat in the corner, cluttered with papers and an old laptop. A cheap digital alarm clock glowed red on the nightstand. 6:47 a.m. The numbers felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up too quickly. The room spun, and I had to steady myself against the wall. That's when I saw my hands. They didn't look like the hands of a 42-year-old man. The skin was smoother. The fingers stronger. No stiffness in the joints. No small scars I had collected over the last decade. No sign of the slow where I had grown used to ignoring. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled toward the mirror hanging above the dresser. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I was afraid. Not of what I would see, but of what it would mean. When I finally forced myself to look, my reflection stared back at me with unfamiliar familiarity. It was me. But younger. 10 years younger. My hair was darker. My face less tired. My eyes still held something I hadn't seen in a long time, belief. Arrogance, maybe. Confidence. The kind that hasn't been broken yet. I pressed my fingers against the glass. The reflection copied me perfectly. My knees gave out. I slid down to the floor, my back against the dresser, my heart racing. This isn't real, I whispered. But the floor was cold. The air smelled like morning. My body felt alive. Too alive to be a dream. That's when I heard her voice. From the kitchen. Casual. Familiar. Dangerous. Are you awake? She called. You're going to be late again. My chest tightened so suddenly I thought I might collapse. Emily. I hadn't heard her voice like that in years. Not calm. Not normal. Not before everything broke. In the life I remembered, the life that ended in a parked car, Emily had left 6 years earlier. She packed quietly. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. Just told me she couldn't keep waiting for a man who was never really there. I never chased her. I told myself I was fine. Now her voice floated through the apartment like nothing had ever gone wrong. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and walked toward the kitchen as if the world might shatter if I moved too fast. She stood by the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. 2. She wore an old blue sweater. One I remembered clearly because she stopped wearing it after the night I didn't come home. She turned when she heard me. Her eyebrows pulled together in concern. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I opened my mouth. 1,000 words rushed forward. I died. I lost you. I ruined everything. Instead, I said the truth, the one I had been too afraid to say before. "I think I've already lost you once." She stared at me. "What are you talking about?" I shook my head quickly. "Nothing. I just didn't sleep well." She studied my face for a moment, then sighed. "Just don't be late tonight," she said quietly. "We need to talk." My heart dropped. I knew exactly what that talk was. 10 years ago, that was the conversation I ignored. That night, I chose work. I chose pride. I chose later. And everything that followed, started there. As she turned back to the coffee machine, one thought settled heavily in my chest. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a dream. I hadn't been brought back to relive my best years. I had been brought back to face my worst mistake. In my first life, I believed I was doing everything right. That was the most dangerous part. At 32, I was convinced that exhaustion meant progress. That being busy meant being important. That the constant pressure in my chest was the price successful people paid, and that someday, somehow, it would all make sense. I wore stress like a badge of honor. Everyone around me did. At work, we spoke in numbers. Targets. Deadlines. Growth. Everything was measured, compared, ranked. If something couldn't be turned into a graph, it didn't matter. I was good at it. That was another problem. I learned quickly how to stay late without complaining, how to answer emails at midnight, how to sound confident even when I felt hollow inside. Promotions came faster than I expected. Compliments followed. People started using my name in meetings like it meant something. I mistook recognition for fulfillment. Emily used to ask me simple questions back then. "How was your day? Are you coming home for dinner? Do you remember what today is?" I answered automatically. "Fine. Soon. Of course." Most of the time, I was lying, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because it was easier than stopping long enough to tell the truth. The truth was uncomfortable. The truth was that I felt constantly behind, constantly afraid that if I slowed down even a little, everything I had built would collapse. That someone younger, hungrier, more ruthless would take my place. So I stayed late. Again. And again. And again. Emily noticed the change before I did. She stopped waiting at the table. Dinner went cold more often. Eventually, she stopped cooking altogether on weekdays. She would eat before I came home, sometimes already asleep by the time I walked through the door. I told myself it was normal. This is what adults do. This is what ambition looks like. This is temporary. Temporary stretched into years. When we talked, it was mostly logistics. Bills. Schedules. Who was buying groceries? We stopped talking about dreams without ever agreeing to stop. Sometimes, late at night, I would find her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, eyes distant. "You okay?" I'd ask. "Yeah," she'd say. "Just tired." We both were. But only one of us was running away. The night everything started to break was supposed to be insignificant. Just another Thursday. I remember standing in the office, jacket already on, when my boss leaned into my doorway. "Big clients in town," he said. "Drinks. Good opportunity." I hesitated. For a second, just a second, I thought about Emily. About the way her voice sounded that morning when she said, "We need to talk." I could still feel the weight of it. I checked my phone. A message from her, sent an hour earlier: "Please don't be late tonight." That should have been enough. It wasn't. I replied to my boss with a smile and said, "Give me 5 minutes." 5 minutes turned into hours. The bar was loud. Bright. Full of people pretending not to care while caring too much. Deals were discussed between jokes and clinking glasses. Compliments were thrown around easily, cheaply. I felt important again. By the time I checked my phone, it was past midnight. 3 missed calls. No new messages. I didn't call back. I told myself she was asleep. When I got home, the apartment was dark. Too dark. Her keys weren't on the counter. Her shoes weren't by the door. The silence felt wrong. I walked through each room slowly, a strange pressure building behind my eyes. The bedroom was untouched. The bed neatly made. Her side empty. On the kitchen table, there was an envelope. My name on it. I didn't open it right away. Some part of me already knew what it said. When I finally did, my hands were shaking. She wrote calmly. Clearly. Without anger. She said she felt invisible. She said she had tried. She said she couldn't keep competing with a life that always came first. She didn't ask me to change. She told me she was leaving. I sat there for a long time, the letter resting on the table like a verdict. I told myself she'd come back. They always do, right? She didn't. The years after that blurred together. Work filled the space she left behind. Promotions replaced conversations. Business trips replaced weekends. My calendar was full, but my apartment stayed empty. At first, people checked in. "Are you okay? You holding up?" I said yes. Eventually, they stopped asking. I bought better things. A better car. A bigger place. Nicer clothes. None of it stayed with me when the doors closed at night. Sometimes, I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back. Older. Harder. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. I told myself it was too late. That the past was done. That regret was useless. That this was just how life turned out. I never imagined I'd be given a chance to test that belief. Standing in that younger apartment, listening to Emily move around in the kitchen, I finally understood something I had missed before. My life didn't fall apart because of one mistake. It fell apart because of thousands of small decisions, each one chosen because it was easier than being present. And now, somehow, I was back at the moment where it all began. I thought changing my life would feel heroic. Like a clean decision. A sudden transformation. It didn't. It felt like withdrawal. Like my body was addicted to the version of me that destroyed everything, and now it was angry that I was taking it away. The next morning at work, I walked in as if I hadn't just cheated death, twice. Everyone greeted me the same way they always had. Casual nods. Half smiles. Quick questions that didn't require real answers. "How's it going? Busy? You ready for the meeting?" I answered like a man who belonged there. And maybe I did. The problem was, I knew what was coming. I knew which conversations would happen, which deals would close, which nights would end with me staring at my ceiling, feeling proud for reasons I couldn't explain. The strangest part was how easy it would have been to slip back. My old life wasn't a prison made of metal bars. It was a prison made of habits. At 11:03 a.m. my phone buzzed. A calendar reminder, client dinner, 8 p.m. In my first life, I never questioned it. I would have accepted it the way you accept weather. Like something unavoidable. This time, I stared at the reminder until my eyes hurt. I could almost hear Emily's voice from the kitchen the day before, "Please don't be late tonight." I still felt the weight of it in my chest. I opened my calendar and deleted the event. Just like that. My finger hovered over the screen as if it might explode. It didn't. Nothing dramatic happened. The world didn't freeze. No heavenly choir sang. But I felt something else. Fear. Because deleting that event meant I was choosing a different life, and I didn't know what that would cost. At lunch, my coworker Mark dropped into the chair across from me like he owned the place. "Big week," he said, biting into a sandwich. "You coming tonight?" "Client dinner." "You can't skip that." "I'm skipping it," I said. He blinked, as if I had spoken another language. "What?" "I'm going home." Mark laughed. "Man, listen. You're on track for a promotion. You've been killing it. This is literally what you've been working for." That sentence hit me like a punch because he was right. This timeline was built for that version of me. The version that sacrificed everything for approval from people who didn't love him. I swallowed. "I have something more important," I said. Mark's smile faded. "Your wife again?" The word stung because I remembered how often I'd said her name like she was an inconvenience. I looked him in the eye. "Yes," I said. "My wife." He stared at me for a second, then shrugged, uncomfortable. "Whatever. Your loss." "My loss." That's what I used to believe too. I used to believe coming home was the loss. Now I knew the truth. Coming home was the win. The hours crawled. At 4:30 p.m. my boss walked out of his office, jacket already on. "Dinner tonight," he said. "We'll pick you up at 7. "I can't," I replied. He paused mid-step. "What do you mean you can't?" "I have family plans," I said carefully. "I told Mark already." My boss's eyes narrowed. "This is important." "So is my marriage," I said. The room felt suddenly too quiet. He stared at me as if he was seeing the outline of someone else wearing my face. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. I almost laughed. If only he knew what a mistake really looked like. In my first life, I would have apologized. I would have panicked, tried to fix it, offered to join after, just for one drink. This time, I didn't. "I'll handle the client tomorrow," I said. My boss exhaled sharply through his nose. "Fine. But don't make this a habit." I watched him walk away. For a moment, my stomach twisted. Because in my first life, his approval had been oxygen. Now I was trying to breathe without it. When I got into my car to drive home, my hands were still shaking. It wasn't the drive that scared me. It was the idea that being home would require something I hadn't practiced in years. Presence. Emily deserved more than a man who simply showed up physically. She deserved someone who could sit at the table without checking his phone every 30 seconds, someone who could hear her without preparing an argument, someone who could admit he was wrong without needing to win first. I didn't know if I could be that man. But I knew what happened if I didn't try. She opened the door before I knocked again. This time she didn't look surprised. She looked cautious. Like someone who had been disappointed too many times and didn't want to believe anything too quickly. "You're actually home," she said softly. "I'm home," I answered. Her eyes moved over my face, searching for the joke, the excuse, the hidden catch. "Okay," she said. "Come in." The apartment smelled like garlic and warm bread. In my first life, I would have barely noticed. Now the smell hit me like a memory of a life I had abandoned. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Not angry silence. More like uncertainty. She kept glancing at me as if waiting for me to stand up and say, "Actually, I have to go." I didn't. Finally, she set down her fork. "So," she said. "Tell me what's going on." My throat tightened. I had rehearsed 1,000 speeches on the drive home. Confessions, apologies, explanations. None of them felt right. So I told the truth, the closest version of it I could. I've been living like I have unlimited time, I said. Like I can always make it up later. Emily's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. And now? She asked. Now I'm scared, I admitted. Because I realized I've been building a life that doesn't include you. She stared at me for a long moment. Then her voice softened, just slightly. I don't want to leave, she said. But I can't stay in a place where I feel alone. The words sank into me like cold water. Because I remembered that letter. I remembered how calm she sounded when she walked away in my first life. And I understood something I hadn't understood then: people don't leave when they stop loving you. They leave when they stop believing you will change. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, forcing myself to hold her gaze. Give me a chance, I said quietly. Not forever. Not blindly. Just a chance to prove I can be here. Emily's lips parted as if she wanted to answer immediately. But instead she looked away, blinking rapidly. When she looked back, her eyes were glossy. You're making it hard to be angry at you, she whispered. I exhaled, feeling my chest ache. I deserve your anger, I said. I just don't want your goodbye. That night, we didn't magically fix everything. We didn't have a movie moment where music swells and all the pain disappears. But when we went to bed, she didn't turn her back to me immediately. She lay there, staring at the ceiling. And when I reached for her hand, slowly, carefully, like I was touching something fragile, she didn't pull away. She let me hold it. I lay awake for a long time after that, listening to her breathing. And somewhere in the quiet, a terrifying thought appeared: changing the timeline might save my marriage. But it might also cost me everything else I had built. And I still didn't know which loss I was ready to survive. The first week felt like a miracle. Not because everything became perfect, but because for the first time in years I could see the cracks forming before the wall collapsed. I came home on time. I listened. I put my phone face down on the counter and left it there like a temptation I refused to feed. I asked Emily about her day and didn't interrupt with solutions or clever opinions. I nodded. I let silence exist without trying to fill it with noise. And she responded. Not with instant forgiveness, but with something more fragile and rare. Trust, trying to come back. On Friday night we took a walk around the neighborhood. The air was cold, the sky clear, and the streetlights made everything look softer than it really was. Emily wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck. Who are you? She asked suddenly, half joking, half serious. I smiled faintly. Someone who finally got scared enough. She stopped walking and looked at me. Scared of what? I swallowed. Of dying alone. Of losing you again. Of waking up at 42 in a life where nothing mattered. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. So I said, scared of waking up one day and realizing I wasted my life. Emily's eyes held mine. For a moment, I thought she might believe me completely. Then her expression shifted into something more complicated. Just, don't do it for a week, she said quietly. Don't do it because you feel guilty. Do it because you actually mean it. I do, I said. I meant it with every part of me. But meaning it wasn't the same as surviving what came next. Monday morning, my boss called me into his office. He didn't invite me to sit. That alone told me this wasn't a normal conversation. He stood by the window with his arms crossed, staring out at the city like it belonged to him. When he finally turned around, his smile was polite in the way a knife can be polite. You've been distracted, he said. I've been focused, I replied. On what? He asked, as if the answer didn't matter. I kept my voice calm. On balance. He laughed once, short and sharp. Balance is for people who aren't climbing, he said. You're either hungry or you're not. In my first life, I would have panicked right then. I would have tried to prove my hunger, my loyalty, my willingness to bleed for the company. But I remembered the car. The silence. The emptiness. So I didn't flinch. I'm still doing my job, I said. He walked to his desk, picked up a folder, and slapped it down in front of me. You missed the dinner, he said. The client noticed. Mark covered for you. He's been stepping up. I opened the folder and saw what was inside. A performance review. The numbers were fine. My results were fine. But the comments were poison. Not a team player. Priorities unclear. Less available. Potential leadership concerns. It wasn't about performance. It was about obedience. My boss leaned forward slightly. You were on track, he said. You were going to be next in line. But if you want to be the guy who goes home early, we can make that happen. Something cold moved through me. Not fear. Anger. Because I realized the truth, in my first life I had traded my marriage for a ladder that someone else controlled. And the moment I stopped sacrificing, they punished me for it. I exhaled slowly. What are you saying? I asked. I'm saying the promotion is off the table, he replied. For now. For now. A familiar phrase. The kind that sounds temporary but becomes permanent if you accept it quietly. I stared at him. And for a second I saw my future split into two roads again. One road led back to the old me, late nights, cheap praise, lonely mornings. The other road led home. I thought I already knew which road I wanted. But then he said something that made my stomach turn. You have a mortgage, he added casually. A lifestyle. You want to protect that, right? I forced myself not to react. He was right. In this timeline, I still had financial responsibilities I'd built around my salary. Around a future I assumed would keep growing. I could lose the promotion. I could even lose the job. And what would that do to my marriage? How long would Emily trust new me if new me couldn't provide stability? I walked out of the office with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. At my desk, Mark leaned over the divider. Everything okay? He asked, almost too innocent. I saw it then. Not proof, but pattern. In my first life, Mark had always been friendly, always supportive, always hovering just close enough to learn what he needed. He wanted my seat. And in this timeline, I had made it easier for him. I stared at my computer screen, feeling heat rise behind my eyes. The second chance wasn't a gift. It was a test with consequences. That evening, Emily noticed immediately. You're quiet, she said as we ate. I forced a smile. Just tired. She didn't accept it. She never had, not really. Talk to me, she said. I hesitated. I didn't want to drag her into my fear. Into the ugly reality that choosing her could cost us money, comfort, security. But keeping it inside was exactly what I used to do. And it had destroyed us. So I told her. Not everything, not the time travel, not the death, but enough. I might be in trouble at work, I admitted. They're not happy that I've been different. Emily set down her fork slowly. Different how? Coming home. Saying no, I said. They're punishing me for it. Emily's face tightened. So what happens now? She asked. I swallowed. I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm going to protect what matters. She looked at me for a long moment, then asked the question that terrified me most. Do you mean me? She whispered. Or do you mean your pride? The words hit me like a slap because they were fair. In my first life, I had confused pride with purpose. I leaned forward. I mean you, I said. I mean us. Even if it costs me. Emily's eyes searched mine, as if trying to find the lie. And then, quietly, she nodded. Okay, she said. Then we'll figure it out. Together. Together. That word did something to my chest. It felt like oxygen. The next day, the universe tested me again. I got a call from my mother. I hadn't talked to her in weeks, in my first life, it was months. Her voice was strained. Your father collapsed, she said. They're taking him to the hospital. My mind went blank. In my first life, my father died when I was 34. 2 years from now. It had been sudden. A stroke. A phone call in the middle of a meeting. I had arrived too late, still wearing my suit, still holding my laptop bag like it mattered. I remembered standing beside his bed, looking at the stillness of his face, thinking about how I had always assumed there would be another visit, another holiday, another conversation. Later. Later again. Now I was staring at a different kind of later. Maybe this was the price. Maybe changing one part of the timeline pulled on another part like thread. I grabbed my keys. At work, my boss tried to stop me. "We have a presentation in an hour," he said sharply when I told him I needed to leave. "My father is in the hospital," I replied. He hesitated, annoyed. "That's unfortunate," he said. But nothing," I cut in, surprising even myself. I walked out. The drive felt endless. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. In my head, memories played like warnings. The first life. The loss. The regret. When I reached the hospital, my mother was in the waiting room, pale and trembling. She stood as soon as she saw me. "You came," she whispered, as if she didn't expect it. "I'm here," I said. We waited. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a doctor came out and spoke in calm, measured words. "Your father is stable. We caught it early. He'll need monitoring." Early. I exhaled so sharply it almost hurt. A second chance. Not just for me. For him too. When they finally let me see my father, he looked smaller than I remembered, lying in the bed with wires and tubes, eyes half closed. I sat beside him and took his hand. "Hey," I whispered. His eyes fluttered open. For a moment he seemed confused. Then he focused on my face. "You look scared," he murmured. I almost laughed. "I am," I admitted. He squeezed my fingers weakly. "Good," he said. "Fear means you finally understand something matters." Tears burned my eyes. In my first life, I had been too late to hear him say anything. Now I was here. Now I had a chance. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been avoiding: a second chance doesn't erase pain. It only changes which pain you choose. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and quiet fear. That strange mix of hope and helplessness that only exists in waiting rooms and hallways where time feels suspended. I sat beside my father's bed long after visiting hours ended, listening to the soft rhythm of the machines, watching his chest rise and fall. In my first life, this room had been a place of endings. In this one, it felt like a warning. When he finally fell asleep, I leaned back in the chair and let the exhaustion catch up with me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Work. Of course. A message from my boss, short and cold: "We need to talk tomorrow morning. Be prepared." I didn't respond. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to. That night, I dreamed, not of the future, but of the past. I dreamed of moments I had dismissed as insignificant. Emily waiting at the table. My father calling, asking if I had time to visit. Me saying, later, without thinking twice. I woke up before sunrise with a heavy understanding pressing down on me: a second chance doesn't come with instructions. It just gives you the same choices again, and waits to see if you've learned. The next morning, I kissed Emily goodbye before heading to work. She looked at me carefully, like she had been doing more often lately. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever happens today, I'm coming home." She reached up and touched my face. "That's all I need to hear," she said. The meeting was short. Too short. My boss didn't waste time with small talk this time. He closed the door, folded his hands, and leaned back in his chair. "You've become unreliable," he said flatly. "Your commitment is questionable." I nodded. "In this company," he continued, "we reward dedication. Sacrifice. Availability." "I know," I said. He studied me, clearly unsettled by my calm. "Mark has shown exceptional flexibility," he added. "He's willing to step up. Be present. Do what's necessary. There it was. The final push. I waited for the familiar panic. It didn't come. What are my options? I asked. He raised an eyebrow. You can recommit. Or we can start discussing transitions. In my first life, that word, transition, would have terrified me. Now it felt like an open door. I won't recommit the way you want, I said quietly. But I will do my job. Honestly. Professionally. He smiled thinly. That's not enough. I took a breath. Then we're done, I said. The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, I saw it clearly, the version of me who would have backed down, apologized, promised to change. That man was already dead. My boss leaned forward. You're throwing away your future. I shook my head. No, I said. I'm choosing it. I left the building with a box in my arms. It wasn't dramatic. No one clapped. No one stopped me. The city looked the same as it always had, busy, indifferent, alive. For the first time in years, so did I. Fear followed me, of course. What about money? What about stability? What if this ruins everything? But beneath the fear was something stronger. Relief. The weeks that followed weren't easy. I took freelance work. Smaller projects. Less money. More uncertainty. Mark got the promotion. I didn't envy him. I had already lived that life. Emily and I adjusted. We talked more than we ever had before, about fears, about plans, about how close we had come to losing each other without even realizing it. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. You feel, here, she said. Like you're actually in the room with me. I smiled. I don't plan on leaving again. My father recovered slowly. We talked during his therapy sessions, during quiet afternoons when words came easily. One day, he looked at me and said, I used to worry you'd wake up too late. So did I replied. He squeezed my shoulder. Looks like you didn't. On my 42nd birthday, 10 years later, in this life, I sat at a kitchen table surrounded by warmth. Emily laughed across from me. My father told a story I'd heard 100 times. The room was loud with life. At one point, I excused myself and stood by the window. The city lights shimmered outside, familiar and distant. I thought about the car. The silence. The moment everything ended, and began. I realized something then. The second chance hadn't been about fixing everything. It had been about choosing what to lose. I lost status. I lost certainty. I lost a version of success that only looked good from the outside. But I kept my life. And that was the only win that ever mattered. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder why I was given another chance. I don't think it was because I deserved it. I think it was because I was finally ready to understand this: you don't ruin your life in one moment. You ruin it slowly, every time you trade what matters for what impresses. And if you're lucky, you wake up early enough to choose again.